Testing, testing.
All right, we're good. We're good. All right. Everybody, I think we're ready.
All right, so I'm calling to order the Amherst School Committee at 6:32 on December 19th, 2023. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. And those are available to you in board docs. Um, So are there any corrections or any comments? All right, I see none. So take a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Point of order. I think we have to say our names to vote when someone's virtual.
Uh, Well, if you want to do that, I mean, that is not necessarily a part of this, but anyway, all those in favor, I'll start with Gabriella.
I'm sorry, Irv, point of order. Was there a motion and was it seconded?
Was there a motion to approve the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as written.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor, I'll start with Gabriella.
Aye.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Katie,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
and who else? I can't see anyone else.
Just you.
That's me. The minutes are approved. It's unanimous. Next agenda item, Doug?
Yep. It's public comment.
Public comment. So are there any members in the audience who wish to make a public comment? If so, come to the front.
There are none.
There are none. And there were some that were submitted. Doug, could you present those? All right,
So next agenda
next
item,
item is superintendent's update.
correct. I just have a couple of small things. One is just a general reminder that this coming Friday, which is the last of school before our break, is a full school day, so I want people to recognize that. Sometimes we'll have a half day on that last day, but given that the holiday's on Monday, and so Christmas Eve is on Sunday, then it's a full day of school on Friday. The second thing I'll mention is we have, last year, we had our school calendar for the 23-24 school year kind of in place by this point, which was earlier than in past years, but so we won't be as early as last year, but we will be working on that fairly soon. So probably in your January meeting, you'll see the projected or potential calendar for the 24-25 school year. So those are the two main things I want to mention to you tonight in the update. And happy to take any questions people have.
Any questions? Who is that? Katie?
I believe at the last meeting you had given us an update about a DESI workshop that you had attended about absenteeism. And we had requested you bring data that discusses levels at the elementary level. Do you have that information?
I do not. But I will say that, in a general sense, it is something we look at all the time. We're regularly reporting to our buildings each week. Ms. Guevara, as part of her work in the Student and Family Engagement and the Family Center, does send attendance information to each of the principals that they review every week. So they do keep an eye on those attendance questions that have, that might arise and work with families on remediating any issues they have. So that is in process and in place. But unfortunately, no, I don't have a specific thing on that.
Anyone else? All right, moving on to the chair's update. What I would like to do is take this opportunity to thank Gabriella, Katie, and Roger for stepping in to fill in for the school committee during some really incredibly trying times. And I have appreciated, and I'm sure all of us have appreciated the efforts that you've made on behalf of the Amherst School Committee. And I really, really want to thank you very much for doing this. This was not an easy task, and I know that. But your stepping in and the contributions that you've made have been really tremendous. I would hope that in the future that we are able to, and you are able to, continue to serve at some level on with the Amherst School Committee. So I thank you very much. So that's my update. Any school committee members? I see Jennifer's hand go up.
Thanks. I wanted to announce that the Regional School Committee and the Union 26 Committee have opened an interest form for members of the public who are interested in serving on the Superintendent Search Committee, the search committee for a new superintendent. The search committee will be made up of community members, so that's parents, guardians, high school students, school staff, and other members of the community, and we want to have a broad cross-section that's representative of the entire community. So anyone is welcome to fill out the form. The opportunity is open to individuals who either live in one of the 4 towns in our district, or who have a child, a student in one of the schools, or who work at one of the schools. And you can find information about the search as well as the interest form on the ARPS website. It's arps.org/SUPT, S-U-P-T, search. So it's arps.org/SUPT search. Thank you.
Jennifer, is there anywhere where they could access what you just said in terms of the forms that they can access on via either board docs or the ARPS website?
Yes, on the ARPS website at arps.org/SUPT search. All of the information about the search is on that page.
All right, thank you. Katie?
Thank you. All of us were invited to an event that took place last Thursday and I believe Sunday at the Mead Art Museum on the campus of Amherst College. It was a project called Mead on the Move, Self-Portraits, and it highlighted the work of Wildwood first grade students from the classes, and a shout out to these educators. The classes of McCall Therian, excuse my pronunciation, Carolina Rothkagel, Zara Fulcher's class, as well as Victoria Monroe's and Jeffrey Coleman's class. And the purpose of the project was to expose students to study how various artists from the Mead collections represent ideas about personality, culture, and identity. And then they made their own self-portraits as well. And might I say that even at the young age of 5, 6, and 7, these students have great talent. And a shout out to the educators as well as the Mead Museum staff for opening their doors. And in speaking with the Mead Museum staff, they just want me to let the general public know that their doors are open, they are free, accessible to the public, and they encourage everyone to come in and visit them for however long. Thank you.
Any other committee updates? Thank you. And we'll move to the next agenda item under new and continuing business. And that brings up the math curriculum.
So for those of you that don't know, this is Mary Kiley. And I'll let her introduce herself and take us through the slides. And so just let me know when you want me to change slides. I have to do it in 2 places, so I'll be toggling back and forth, but
Okay. Thank you, Doug. So as Doug said, I'm Mary Kiley. I'm the District Curriculum Administrator and formerly a math and special education teacher at Amherst Regional High School. And I'm really pleased to be here tonight to update you on our first year and a half with the new elementary math curriculum, which is iReady Classroom Math. Next slide, thank you. So just to remind us all on why we had a curriculum search in the first place, the real driver was a concern about equity and opportunity gaps, combined with an awareness that there were really better curricular options in the marketplace. It had been 10 years since we had changed math curriculum. And that was combined with an awareness of some current research suggesting that curriculum was a much more powerful equity driver than had previously been realized. For example, there was some research in 2016 suggesting that it could amount to as much as a half a year of additional growth for students, high quality instructional materials. It was also a good time in terms of funding options, which is always important because curriculum can be very expensive, and I'll discuss those funding options later. Next slide, please. So we put together a committee of 20 people from across the district and from the community at large. And we engaged in a process of successive winnowing. To begin with, we cast the net pretty wide, and we had 8 curricula that we're looking at, and we had these 5 parameters that were non-negotiable. So if something didn't meet, a curriculum didn't meet one of these 5 parameters, it was off the list. So, for example, there was a very good curriculum which did not provide sufficient level of support for learning math and Spanish, so that curriculum was eliminated. Next slide, please. I think there's one, yes, that one. Thank you, Doug. So by the time we got down to 4 curricula that we were looking at, we were really digging deeply into what the instruction looked like for students and for teachers. And again, I can give you an example. One curriculum was eliminated because there was too much, it was highly rated, but we felt there was too much emphasis on procedural fluency, which means algorithms. carrying the one, and so on, when students are doing multi-digit addition, for example, and not enough emphasis on underlying concepts, underlying understandings. As math teachers, we always think about math as sort of a three-legged stool where you want to have conceptual understanding and procedural fluency and application. And so that curriculum was eliminated because it really wasn't a strong conceptual foundation. And we eventually ended up with iReady Classroom Math. And I'll talk as we go along about what in particular drove that final decision. You can advance again, Doug. Thank you. So one of the things that was most attractive to us, and it was one of our priorities, was the extent to which iReady Classroom Math permitted data-informed teaching and learning. And I'll talk some more about what this means for, not just for students, but for teachers in the classroom. A lot of this happens through a tool called the iReady Diagnostic. And there are many resources that are aligned with that. You can advance, Doug.
Oop, shoot, one click too many. I don't use the touchpad much.
So the diagnostic assessment, it's an assessment that happens 3 times a year for students. It takes 60 to 90 minutes, and it's what they call a SMART test. So the test adjusts, the assessment adjusts as students take it. So for example, if a student gets a question correct, the level of difficulty will increase. If a student gets a question incorrect, the level will decrease. So it's very different from something like MCAS in that respect. And it's very comprehensive, even though it only takes an hour, 60 to 90 minutes. It provides information about student progress in the 4 domains of math, so algebra, geometry, data, and number sense and operations. And it also, it provides both normative and criterion reference data. So it's not that the teachers and families just get a number, oh, your student is performing at the 70th percentile. There's really detailed criterion reference information. So it might say something like your student is currently able to add fractions with similar denominators, like denominators. The next step will be adding fractions with unlike denominators. So it's super helpful. And the final thing is that it really has the power to influence instructional decisions in a profound way. I would have loved to have had a tool like this when I was teaching in an elementary classroom. Doug, if you could advance. So we're just going to look a little bit. We could talk all night about data, but we're just going to look at a little bit of data. So this is some of the information that an administrator would be available to, an administrator at the district level or building level. And there's a 5-category grading system. So the striped green is mid or above grade level. The solid green is early on grade level. Yellow means working on standards that are 1 year below grade level. And then the pink is 2 years below, and the striped pink is 3 years below, working on standards 3 years below grade level. The goal is to get everyone green, working on grade level. So you can see here this was the first diagnostic in our year 1 that students took in the fall. So 30% roughly were in the green zone, meaning working on grade level standards. About 22% on the other end were working on standards 2 or more years below grade level. By the spring, as you can see, there had been considerable growth. It was up to 66% in the green zone, the grade level zone, and down to 8% students working 2 or more years below grade level. The next few slides are just snapshots of the performance of students in subgroups. In some of the subgroups, we could break it down more finely. And so the numbers in the boxes to the right correspond with the 5 categories. So the 23% goes with the striped green, which is the mid or above grade level. The 15% goes with the early on grade level, and so on. That's how you read that. It doesn't have headers. And then below, so you can see for this one is students receiving special education services. And you can see that's compared to students who are not receiving special education services for the same test administration. And there are still gaps, for sure, there are still opportunity gaps. But I can tell you that over the course of the year in all groups, it did improve. This is for English language learners, not just Spanish learners, but students learning all languages other than English. Next slide. This is for our Latinx students. And the final one is for our Black and African American students. Thank you, Doug. So a second key reason that we chose iReady Classroom Math was the extent to which it upholds equity and access for all learners, and also the extent to which it centers students' cultures and identities and the context in which they're living and learning. So this prerequisites report that I mentioned very briefly earlier is derived directly from the diagnostic. So 3 times a year, right after students take the diagnostic, teachers and soon families have access to the results. And for teachers, this prerequisites report, what it makes possible is a level of differentiation that we couldn't do before. So, for example, say a teacher had the students do the diagnostic, then for all subsequent lessons, the students, the algorithm will let teachers know how students should be grouped. So say they're moving to that lesson on fractions, adding fractions with unlike denominators. There'll be a report generated for that particular lesson which suggests the groupings for students according to whether they already have all the standards that they need to be successful with that level of grade level instruction, whether they need some support or whether they need significant support. It doesn't just tell teachers that, it tells them exactly which standards they need to be successful with that particular lesson and gives them those lessons. So it takes all the guesswork out. It's just such a powerful tool for teachers to be able to use. And it really, what it enables, as someone who worked in special education as well as regular education, what it makes possible is pre-teaching rather than just constant reteaching. And that feels very, very different to students. So a teacher can look ahead and know that a lesson is coming up and see what kind of instruction students will need to be successful with these grade level standards, because the goal is for all kids to be working on grade level standards, and incorporate that into instruction before the students even get to that lesson. So it's extremely powerful. It also, if you could just hold on that one for just a minute, please, Doug. Go back, yeah. It also just, this was the top curriculum, I can tell you, in terms of supporting math learning in Spanish, which was very important to us because we have about 25 to 30% of our students identify as Latinx, and we have a dual language program. So this was really, and it's not just a kind of token support, it's really a profound level of support. The teacher's guides, the student workbooks are in Spanish, but so is the diagnostic. Students can take the diagnostic in Spanish. All the learning games online, they can access those in Spanish. And there's an online personalized instruction component that is also derived from the diagnostic results, and that's available in Spanish. So it's really strong level of support. And it's not just Spanish that gets supported. Many family support resources are available in 15 languages. We couldn't believe it when we were looking at curricula and saw this. So letters that go home to families about particular lessons, videos about how to interpret the diagnostic results and how to use the curriculum at home. There are just so many resources for families and such support and such a deep understanding of that people come from very different places. And finally, there's a very, I think, sensitive but really strong support for cultural connection. So we have 3 slides coming up that just show you, I just excerpted a few things from lessons in grades 3 through 5, and you can see how there's cultural connections, and then those are used in problem-solving situations. And the teachers and students really like that. You can go to the next slide, Doug. So here's just an example. So this is a grade 5 lesson, and there's in this Connect to Culture section, they introduce what a futon is. But then you'll notice they start using it in problem solving, but it's also not in a simplistic way. So that there's a recognition, I think, in this curriculum that identity is intersectional, and so there's a reference to a student's foster dad. It's not done in a very simplistic way, and that's as part of the lesson on that incorporates the futon. You can go on, Doug. This is the 3rd grade lesson on area that's based on a celebration, a Bahamian celebration called Ginkanu. You can keep going.
Okay.
And this one I love. This is about empanadas because I'm always misplacing my own measuring cups. I like to bake. And so this is entirely practical, right? You need the 3/4 of a cup of something. So which measuring cup? You can't find your 1/4 measuring cup. Should you use the 1/3 or the 1/8? And again, when you go back to those 3 legs of the math stool, application is so important. It's not about just doing a page of math problems in a book. It's really, math is such a powerful tool for working and living. So this, I'm not going to read this whole slide. A really important part of our implementation has been professional development. We recognize that there are so many pieces to this curriculum and so many rich resources, and that it was going to take a lot of support for people to really use it effectively and to know what was available. And also educating families about this was an important piece. So there are just a series of trainings that were not just for teachers, but also for paraeducators, for building leaders. We had family math nights, and again, all geared at introducing this and then helping people understand how to use it. There were other tweaks we made that were not professional development per se. For example, in our first year, we have math specialists in each building, and we decided to redeploy them for that first year as math coaches to help teachers get on their feet with the new curriculum. And we used ESSER funds to sort of fill in the gaps because, of course, the intervention work with students, which those people normally do, still had to be done. So we were able to redeploy them and pay for some other people to work on intervention. We also created personalized learning time. Teachers call them PLTs. For students, this was an increase in math teaching and learning time. They normally get a 60-minute block, and then there are 5 30-minute blocks during the week. Some are used for literacy and some for math. And this was a vehicle for students to be able to access this online personalized learning that the curriculum makes available. So when a child logs onto what they call My Path, it's based on the diagnostic results. So the algorithm delivers to them exactly what they need. But there needed to be additional time for students to work on that. So that's why we added in that extra time. So one thing I want to talk about was how we paid for all of this. Um, we, um, we knew there would be ESSER funds when we were looking at curriculum a couple of years ago, but there was also, this has been a really high priority on the part of DESE. And so when we were engaging in the curriculum review, there was a really interesting funding opportunity. There was a competitive funding opportunity. We had to compete for it. It was called Accelerating Math Instruction for Students. We applied and were awarded this funding. So we got $140,000 for the first year, which basically paid for all the materials and all the digital licenses. There were only tiny things like buying manipulatives that we had to pay for ourselves. And then last spring, we saw posted a second year 2 opportunity called this High Quality Instructional Materials Grants. We applied for that as well and were awarded the second year of funding, and that was worth almost $170,000. So in all, DESE has supported us with about $300,000 worth of support, which has been really significant. Unfortunately, the candy is running out. So we're not expecting to have any support from the state for next year, but it's made a huge difference in these first 2 years to be able to fund especially the PD and the coaches. We also, and just to tell you a little bit about some of our year 2 activities. Year 2, of course, began this summer. This was required by the grant, but we're finding it very helpful. We established a district-wide math leadership team because we want to have a broad base helping us figure out future directions. And so that team, it also includes representatives from the teacher education program at Mount Holyoke, and they've been very helpful. You can go on to the next slide, Doug, thank you. And we've continued with a really robust program of continued professional development. A couple of things, just to highlight a couple of things that have been very helpful. The leadership consultancy days for building leaders, we're doing 2 of these this year. So someone from Curriculum Associates and the math coaches and I and my colleague from the Office of Teaching and Learning, we go to the schools and we meet and debrief on the data, dig deeply into the school's data and look at the data of different classrooms and which tools are being used and which could be used more effectively and so on, and do walkthroughs through classrooms. And those have been super helpful. And another piece that we're doing is these math content knowledge training sessions. Elementary teachers, having started out myself as an elementary teacher, and Roger can tell you for sure, it's a heavy lift, right? They're teaching so many different subjects, and math isn't everyone's favorite subject, right? People don't all come with really strong math backgrounds, or maybe that's not their favorite. And so a goal of our new curriculum was to provide continued professional support for teachers to continue to grow their own understanding of math along with their students. And these math content knowledge training sessions have been fabulous. They really help teachers to understand the sequence as well, not just what's happening when they teach multiplication, but how that's connected to earlier breaking down numbers and how it's connected ultimately to algebra. And people have just really found these to be tremendously useful. Also very popular with paraeducators. Paraeducators are really valuing having this opportunity to get some direct math content knowledge and to really dig into the curriculum in more depth. So that's something we'll definitely continue. And we've also had family math nights. Those will be an ongoing feature every year. And yeah, we're looking at a book group. So lots here. Happy to take questions.
All right, so open to questions.
I got a couple.
Roger?
Thank you. Nice summary of what you all have been up to.
Thank you.
I noticed that this is a K-5 curriculum,
Correct.
because I was a 6th grade teacher. What do the 6th graders take?
The 6th graders are working on Desmos math.
Okay.
This curriculum does go through 8th grade, but they were already working on Desmos, and that had been a recent adoption,
Yeah, okay. That was the first
which is also a highly rated curriculum, but a different one.
Yeah, I know it. The second question, there is a great deal of, I guess I would say, breadth to this. If a student's depth, and even those in sixth grade decimals, it would seem to me, when I taught, there were always 2 or 3 or 4 students in sixth grade that were certainly ready for middle school. Some of them, in fact, one year, I got in trouble. I taught a whole year of algebra to these 2 boys who were ready. And my question is, what do you do with those? With those kids that just, they're beyond. And I see the cogency of what you have here. Is there something you said, or you just take that as it happens and then figure out what to do?
That's the answer.
That's-
As it happens. And the personalized learning, the individualized personalized learning does go through the end of 8th grade.
Okay.
We just had a student actually finish, a 5th grader, finish the 8th grade content. So
And
It's
that's
very
what
much
I
on my
wanted to
mind
hear.
about how we
That's what I
will-
wanted to hear. Beautiful. Sorry, Jennifer.
Katie?
Thank you very much. I have a question about the element of the online access, and if there's any surveying or data collection that's been done about those students who access that element. I know with my sixth grader, it was often presented as an enrichment activity, certainly not required, but knowing that some of your, one of your parameters is upholds equity and access for all learners, I'm curious if you've looked at that digital divide in terms of how students are performing. I mean, in my own home, we have computers, but there might be limitations or restrictions against screen time. In other families, people might not have access to screens that could give them access to the enrichment options. So curious to hear about that.
we're very aware of the digital divide, and with some families, you can access this on phones. We discussed with the superintendent last year the possibility of providing supplemental devices to families that don't have a device at home. But the answer was that, of course, this happened during COVID, that all students were provided with devices, and there was so much damage to devices that it was not something that, broken screens and so on, that it was not something that the district could sustain at that time, in any large-scale way. But you're right, there are definitely differences among families. Some of it, honestly, has been educating families, because and that's why we've been doing these family math nights and so on, because families are busy, and for them to understand even what's available. The diagnostic results report for the first year, we decided not to, the teachers could see them, but we were not sending them home, because the teachers were still learning how to interpret and how to access the reports and how to use the curriculum themselves. But and that continued through this first diagnostic in the fall, but beginning with this next diagnostic, as soon as a student finishes a diagnostic, families will be able to access the report. And I think at that point, that's also going to kind of raise the profile of the curriculum a little bit. I think people will be more aware. And for those families that don't have digital access, of course, we'll have to send them home and so on. But I worry about the same thing that you worry about. I think there are different levels of access.
Jennifer?
Thanks, Mary, for coming and giving us this summary, and also for all the work and effort that's gone into choosing the curriculum and then all the applying for the grants and then professional development. It's really great to see. I have a question. I have some questions about the diagnostic results. So, I'm sorry, Doug, do you mind going back to slide 8? So it showed that the overall placement in fall of 22 showed 50% of students at one grade below grade level. Is that seems high? Is that like due to the pandemic? Has it looked better in past years? What can you put that into context for me?
Sure. I think there's a learning curve also. That was the first time students took the diagnostics. So I think that has to be factored in. It was also coming on the heels of COVID. And frankly, the reason why I came to this position, to the curriculum job, was because I was working at the high school and seeing these gaps and seeing the different levels of student preparation. There was just very little consistency across the district, and math is a sequential subject. And even with very gifted and devoted teachers, if students don't get consistent instruction and don't get sequential instruction, they're going to come with gaps. And by the time they get to high school, it's difficult to fill those gaps. Yeah.
Okay, great. So then on the next slide, you show the spring 23 diagnostic test, and it looks like a big improvement, which is wonderful. And then you sort of slice and dice the data in different groups of students.
Correct.
So were there any learnings that came out of looking at how different groups of students performed that led to any changes or improvements? Like, did you learn, did anything pop out as to looking at the different groups of students and how their performance improved compared to the overall that led you to make any changes? Or
One, I would say the most profound change that we're working on is trying to get everyone to implement the curriculum with integrity. There's room for individual variation. This is a really powerful tool that has the potential to really change the way teaching for students who are not currently working at grade level happens. I think in many cases, and as a special educator, I know this, students are pulled out, and we try to address the learning that they have not yet mastered, which is important, but meanwhile, they're getting behind on the current content. It's a difficult juggle. So trying to get people, for example, colleagues, to not pull students out as much and expose them to the grade level content while trying to give them that just-in-time support. It's a very different paradigm. It's a profoundly different paradigm. And that in itself, I think, has the biggest potential to really change the opportunity gaps that we're seeing. But it's a real paradigm shift, that we know that there are skills that these children still have who have gaps, but we have to do both at the same time. We have to expose them to grade level content, or they're never going to catch up.
okay. I guess I was asking more like, so if you go to slide 12, as an example, you show yes Hispanic Latino and no Hispanic Latino, and they look different. They look significantly different. Like, and then on the next slide you have Black or African American, but not a comparison. So I guess my first question is, if we see this information in the future, it would be great to look at all racial groups on one page so that we can compare. Like, you haven't shown white students and you haven't shown Asian Pacific Islander students, but like, does this Hispanic or Latino, yes or no? Does do these differences, is it surprising? Did anything come out of seeing this data that led you to think that something needed to be changed or different about about the curriculum or the implementation?
We don't feel, what the company has told us, and I believe it, is it takes at least 3 years before you can really see how much impact it's had. So I feel just to keep sort of our foot on the accelerator for the next few years, and to stick with, we've had a tendency to, which Roger knows, to change things up and not to stick with things sometimes. And I think in math, that's a really bad idea. I think to really just stick with this and to try to ensure that kids are getting even the power of common routines, not having to adjust to a completely different mode of operation year to year. Here are the routines in math. That in itself is very powerful. So we're not saying, until we see whether we really feel like we have a robust implementation, I think we've made some strides. I don't think we're going to change anything else up.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean change the curriculum, which you've put so much effort into bringing on, but just, I don't know, maybe I'm not asking it correctly, or maybe there isn't really a clear answer, but like when you see these differences between yes, Hispanic Latino, and no, what does that tell you about, what does this tell you, and what can we learn from this, and what, I don't know, just, the numbers are very different. Is that concerning? And,
It's very concerning.
yeah.
It's why we engaged in this to begin with, and we knew it wouldn't be something that we would be able to undo overnight, but it absolutely is of serious concern. I just don't think there are simple answers. These are very complex questions with many roots, and I think we can just bring the best tools we have to bear. And we will look at it very carefully every year, of course, but that's where we are right now.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just offer a couple other little tidbits about sort of these demographic categories, just as perhaps a reminder to some or information to others. So Hispanic Latino is what's considered an ethnicity, and so you can be within one of those groups and then also be in the Black and African American group as well. So there's overlap between some of these categories in how kids are quantified. I think in the short term, what that demonstrates is some areas of work and some opportunity gaps that it's sort of hard evidence of that, and and points to the work that needs to be done. And as Mary said, some of the reason why we're picking a curriculum like this, so we can see this, but also so we've got tools to address needs, whether sort of regardless of what the kids' needs are, but if we're seeing particular things in particular categories of kids, regardless of category, we can be more focused or provide or be creative about ways we might approach that in the future.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Gabrielle, you haven't said anything.
I
please.
think that Irv needs to decide which one of
No,
us.
no,
is-
Yeah,
you go first.
I was looking, Gabriella.
All right.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask maybe a follow-up question to what Jennifer was asking. I had wanted to ask you about the same data, but from the perspective of, do you know if these data looked like this before you implemented this kind of math? So to me, there still seems to be quite a gap.
I agree.
And is that a bigger gap than we had before, a smaller gap, about the same? I realize it's only a year and a half in, and like you said, it's going to take some time to start seeing the effect, because for one thing, even implementing it right is going to take some time. But I'm just wondering if you have any comparison to sort of a similar data set or similar gap information from before, and then I have a couple other questions.
Okay. We have MCAS data that indicating significant gaps. There's a correlation of between 0.8 and 0.9 between the two, between the iReady diagnostic and the MCAS results, but they don't, it's still difficult to really compare the two. They're two different tests and so on, but we certainly have evidence of really concerning and significant opportunity gaps in our subgroups from the MCAS data as well.
So that was actually one of my other questions. The data that you've shown here is sort of internally relative, right? It would be interesting to see, and maybe you have some information already on the MCAS results, especially if you have a few years of students on iReady, and then compare to MCAS results before iReady. I don't know if you have any yet. You've got perhaps spring 23 MCAS data, but that might not be enough to really see a difference yet.
We have not put a lot of time, honestly, into comparing the two at this particular point. The proficient on MCAS translates really is the striped green, and those correlate pretty well across. So what MCAS says is proficient would be mid or above grade level, and those numbers do.
But you also get that school average score compared to like the state average and so on. It would be useful to see if that changes in any way, if you see that shifting at all as you spend another couple of years with iReady.
I agree.
So
Right, we'll be watching that very closely.
I won't be on the school committee at that point, but I would certainly encourage you to be able to discuss that sort of data.
I
I'd be
agree.
interested in seeing it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I do.
Roger?
From having sat in a classroom for a long time and having students come in and having them, because they were sixth graders, they could talk about how math was different from third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade. And most of it had to do not with the fact that, well, fraction is a fraction. What it had to do with was how that was given to them, how it was served to them. And it seems like, and when you got iReady, I was at Fort River talking with Tammy, and I went through the curriculum. It really is good. I always have my doubts about anything that comes boxed. You know, I'm adding my own thing to a box cake. But there was a sameness in instruction, and I can't remember how many grade levels I looked, but the way they introduced the information was very similar, and some of the things that kids do next were very similar. So kids get into that routine where they're not thinking about that routine, but the concepts involved. So I just want to, yeah, I'm going to have to visit some class. As soon as I get off school committee, I can go visit a class and they'll say, oh, it's just Roger, he's here, no problem. But I like this. And your questions, when you talk about MCAS and you talk about the diagnostics that these kids are going through, it's a very different situation. And I'll just leave it at that, but good work.
Thank
Keep it
you.
up. Keep it up. If I can help.
Thank you.
Let me
We'll
know.
take you up on that.
Okay.
So this seems like, when I've looked at this curriculum, it's extraordinary. When I looked at the numbers, and having been an ex-classroom teacher, one of the bedeviling things when you go through a curriculum is that you have X percentage of kids who are doing well, some of them all right. But then you have the bedeviling thing is that they're in your classroom and there are kids who are performing not at grade level, but below grade level. And so the question becomes, there are two questions here. One is, how does iReady deal with those kids who are not performing as expected?
One of the main resources is, as I was saying before, the prerequisites report, so that enables teachers to, as they prepare for lessons, to know based on the diagnostic results which students need particular supports to be successful with that grade level instruction, and exactly what those supports are. So it takes just a lot of the guesswork out of it, and Roger would know how much time can go into looking for resources, and you would know as well, or when you're trying to meet the needs of those students, whether they're functioning above grade level or working on standards below grade level. In both cases, that differentiation from multiple levels is always so challenging. And another resource that the curriculum makes available, which is why we have this professional learning time now, personalized learning time, is they have online time. They're supposed to do between 30 and 50 minutes a week on this online individualized learning that's tailored just for them. So whatever standards they most need to work on, the curriculum will deliver that into this online product called MyPath. So those are two of the ways that the curriculum, I think, helps with that kind of differentiation. And also, I think what Roger just mentioned is in my opinion, very important, and that's the routines. Because what it does is when students have consistent routines, it frees up executive functioning space in their brains, and they can focus more on the math learning and less on, that's what I was saying, the adjustment year to year that kids had to do when people were teaching profoundly different things and in very different ways. And that's just hard for students.
One other question is there, do you have data on what the relationship is between the performance of Black and African Americans with iReady and other populations?
Do you mean in other districts or in our district?
In your district, in our district?
We do, we do. There is, information is broken down by subgroup. And as Doug said, the subgroups are intersecting, right? But we do have the capability to sort the data by more than one. That's why I was saying we could talk about data all night using more than one criterion.
You know, yeah, I for one would love to look at those numbers and see where the intersections are. Because I think that it would be an important kind of number to look at, and the differentiations that occur because of the curriculum or not because of the curriculum would be just something interesting to look at. The other thing is, one of the question is, has there been any criticism of iReady,
That's a really
either
good.
externally or internally?
I would say the biggest objection has been that it's a heavy lift. It has been a heavy lift for everyone in this first year and a half. It's really a lot to learn. And it's been super helpful for us to be able to provide all of this professional development. And still, teachers have to put the time in. And it's a shift of paradigm, this whole idea that we want to do more pre-teaching than reteaching, and that students who previously were pulled out more, we want them being exposed to grade level content in the classroom, and that's a shift. It's really a shift. So I don't know if it's criticism so much as just an awareness that this is hard. And people are saying now, when we have one kind of professional development that we've been offering that has been very successful, and we even when we don't have funding from DESE, extra funding to support this, we will definitely continue, is getting grade level teachers from across the district together to spend either a half a day or a day. Last week we had the third grade teachers from 10 to 3 meeting together, went into one of those teachers' classrooms to watch a lesson, then came out and debriefed, and then planned for some instruction altogether that will happen in 6 weeks from now. And so they got a chance to talk about, what are you struggling with, and how are you using that resource? And that was just extremely helpful, and the teachers were really grateful for that. So that's something we'll continue to engage in. But I would say that's the main one, Irv, just that it's a lot. And we never have enough time, right? I mean, even when we have the funding, we don't have as much time as we would like. There are competing priorities within the school day.
Yeah, I would agree with you that the shift in paradigm, i.e. pre-teaching, is a complete shift in paradigm
Right.
in terms of approach. Are there any other questions for anyone? And I really, really appreciate it. This has been really, really helpful. And I thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, next up, Elementary School Building Committee. Roger.
Gee, Mary was so good, I want to skip mine. Okay, no. We have met, we met in October, met in November, and we met in December. And because of, what we did with our November meeting, I got a lot to tell you. So, first of all, from the November meeting, it was confirmed that the state was going to up their contribution to by $9.7 million, which was very exciting. And that was all confirmed. It was out there, but then it was all confirmed. The important meetings have been, there was a meeting with on the 14th with the Disability Advisory Committee. The construction workers, the plan is, they're going to have to change the way circulation goes into Fort River once they get started. So there was a meeting, site phasing for circulation. So they had no conclusions at the moment, but at least they got to talk to the stakeholders down there to figure out how they're going to handle that. The construction documents, one of the things, they're going to remove the south parking lot, the comfort station and the lights. They have to. And they're going to start stockpiling loam. They're going to install what they call RAM aggregate piers in order to strengthen the soil. All of this has to be done for it has to sit for 3 or 4 months for the ground to compress and become strong enough for the new building. The team is also working, and this has to be done carefully, with Berkshire Gas Company to relocate the gas line that currently supplies Fort River and runs through the middle of the new building construction site. Berkshire Gas has been wonderful. It is already in the budget. They knew this. It's already in the budget. Berkshire Gas has, said, oh yeah, that's enough. They also talked about site where there's going to be somebody monitoring the site work. And there's going to be a geotechnical engineer there to take a look at what they call overburdening the soil so that it's compressed enough. So they'll be doing testing on that. The update from the sustainability subcommittee. They're working. They got the compliance. They're going to be in compliance, or working on being in compliance with the new state energy code. And Jonathan, one of the engineers, commented that the project is not the only the town's first net zero public building, but it's also breaking ground as one of the first buildings that's going to go through this new energy code. There are some gaps and some things they have to figure out, like building use. How is that new school going to be used, and what are the hours, and how they're going to have all of that is in process, and that's what they're working on. We had a long discussion on engineered wood fiber and poured in rubber, in place rubber. Oh my goodness. It was quite a discussion, and it was a good one. And what the folks from Donesco did sort of come up, we went and actually got statistics about, how good is the rubber for falls, the poured in place rubber and wood fibers. And what the building committee came up with is they're going to use poured in place, but not for the whole thing, because it's 15,000, it's big. But they're going to use it under the equipment, and they're going to figure out how to use engineered wood fiber or other materials as part of the access, and maybe even some asphalt, so that kids can roll down there in their wheelchairs if they have to. And it was, whew, I just want to say, we could talk about the track, but we could talk about, and so it was a good conversation. It got a little bit, people have their views on it, and so Donesco said, the company said, yeah, we can work on that. We can use as little as possible, but we have to protect the children from falls. Then they talked about the boring part. They talked about paying bills, which, and the invoices they've received, which we have money for, so I don't think I'm going to bore you so much with that. However, on the December meeting, and because we have not approved those minutes, I'm just going to summarize some things that are definitely going to happen. There's going to be an abutter notification so that the abutters know. There'll be also an update of the early site packages. The Massachusetts School Building Authority, like 60% of your design to be done. And they'll comment on that 60%, and then more information comes in. We talked about selecting playground equipment. And you sort of have to know what was going to be under it, and so now we have an idea. And those are the things that they're doing. Doug's timeline that he sent us was very interesting, if you haven't seen it. Irv made a bet, I think he made it with Jennifer, and I just want to know, is it going to be done on time? And the way this committee works, they're holding themselves to a very high standard. I got to give Kathy Sheen and all of them credit. Part of the one thing I haven't mentioned is the permitting process. They're going to meet with the planning and conservation committees, and that's coming up. And there was something about when does the planning committee meet, and can we fit in? They fit in a discussion, and they have to work that out, and they weren't sure. The Conservation Committee is pretty much the same way. So they were working on the dates. They didn't have the exact date, but it's coming up either, I think, the first week in January, or they may have met. But as of that, we don't know, but they're working on it. That's what I have.
Irv, if I could add just a couple things.
Yes.
So I pulled up the timeline here, and this was in what's called a design development document. So, as they go through the process, there's certain, landmark times for the MSBA to submit things to them. So this was from what's called the design development, which is a stage in the process of that. They're working on what's called construction documents as we speak. One of the things that's not shown here, but really sits, they've got construction and they've got it scheduled for at the beginning of August of this summer. What's not there is the dirt work. So that really is beginning in the target timeframe for that's April of this year or late March, depending. So I think the Conservation Commission, I want to say it was this month that they were going to have at least an initial meeting with the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board. I think just given the schedule, it was going to be kind of mid-January before they were going to get onto their agenda. But the Conservation Commission piece is underway, and those are complex and highly technical meetings. And so, I think the designers and professionals we have are confident to be able to work through that pretty clearly, because the sort of rules around that sort of stuff are well defined. But that may make they may place requirements or slight adjustments to things as that process unfolds. But I think the thing to keep in mind in looking at this this sort of timeline is that, and what isn't shown here is this sort of dirt work. So literally, contracts will go out for that initial dirt work at Fort River in late February, March. Hopefully they'll get someone under contract fairly quickly and begin construction from the standpoint of bringing in a lot of dirt to raise the level of the soil. That will necessitate what is the south entrance or the entryway for the school to be only for construction vehicles. So once that starts, all traffic will go through the other end, the end closest to Main Street. So we've had some initial meetings and multiple meetings, but more recently sort of kind of trying to articulate on site how it will explicitly work. What are the questions that we still need to resolve? What are the points of conflict and that sort of thing? We're still working through that. We're going to need to message that out to the Fort River community, because that's coming up in literally a few months, and it will profoundly change how they interact with dropping off and picking up their kids, and how their buses are going to work around the site. We'll also connect with the town, and are connecting with the town around how it plays out on Southeast Street, Northeast Street there as well. And they're certainly aware and are partners with us in this, and you know, the town manager sits in the school building committee and others, so, you know, they're not absent any knowledge of this whatsoever. So, you know, we're going to continue to coordinate on those topics because they're going to be profound. And I think, you know, we may have to sort of live and learn and adjust our strategies around that, because that sort of one-way entrance, or that, you know, one inlet outlet, you know, one thing we're going to do is add a lane, basically, so there's one in and two out. But, you know, we may have to modify what we think is going to work right now based on how things play out over the next, you know, few months this year and potentially over the next couple of years of construction. So, you know, I'm going to ask folks to be patient in advance, because I think it's going to be quite a learning curve for everybody as far as how that, you know, the mechanics of that play out, and we'll modify and adjust. And the key thing is to keep all the kids as safe as we can when there's traffic around the building. And that's true today, and it'll be especially true when we have a much more complicated circumstance and circulation pattern around the building. But I did stick this in. Those timelines are we're still on target for all these timelines. This is from documents from a couple of months ago, so those are all staying true to form, and you see the construction starting in earnest, like putting up the building kind of construction, you know, foundational sort of work starting in August of this year.
Doug,
Technically next year.
and/or Roger, when will this go out to bid?
So the first work to do to bring in the soil and that preparatory work is going to go out to bid, I think late February, early March is the target, and then the contracting for the actual construction will be, you know, summertime. I'm thinking like June and July is the sort of targets for that, I believe, as well.
That's right.
All right. Roger,
Yes, sir.
I really want to thank you for your service on this building committee, the school building committee. You've done a really great job, and we definitely will be sorry to have you go. But I really want to take this time to thank you very much
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
for your service. And the other thing is that, just as a prenup, Roger's replacement will be made when the school committee reorganizes in January. And then we will pick a new person to be on that particular school building committee. Other than that, are there any other questions or further discussions on this topic? Gabriella?
I have a question. I think it's for Doug. I'm looking at the timeline, and it shows in July of 26, demo building / site construction. Does that mean demolishing the currently existing building?
That's correct.
And-
And also the field work, so there'll be some reworking of the fields. I mean, some of the fields are fields now, and they'll stay that way, but the space where the building currently sits, I believe, is also scheduled to be part of the either play space or fields.
Okay, but the new school building will be occupied at that point, right? Students will be, okay, so.
That's correct.
And are there safety issues I'm assuming there are, like, some sort of safety issues as a building is being demolished right where children are
Yeah,
hanging
so
out?
it's in the same vein as the construction. It's sort of the, you know, sort of flip side. It's interesting, the sort of boundary that we'll have will probably stay. They'll just move all the big heavy equipment on the other side of the fence and move all the kids and, you know,
Make sure there's no
other stuff on the other.
contact of the
But
two. Yeah.
absolutely a real concern and an area of you know, an area that we'll need to control fairly well, because it won't be done in a day, and we'll want to make sure that the sites are secure. And that's true in both, you know, both in the construction phase as well as the demolition phase, is
But
that those are safe places.
will there be an opportunity will the kids still have opportunities for outdoor play, recess, and all of those things? That there still will be some space for that?
Yeah, there's some, I mean, it's going to be, during construction it'll be limited, because there's some spaces we're taking offline. So for example, just, you know, even as early as this March, what's now the north side, which is where there's some basketball courts on the north end, that's where the buses will go. And there are parking spots that we're losing, so there's going to be some parking in that space. So that is going to come offline. So there's going to be a definite reduction in the amount of space that's available for play. It won't be all gone, but it'll be, you know, curtailed, and we're working around that. And that's true in both phases, and you know, both with the construction and the demolition afterwards.
Jennifer?
As someone who drives past Fort River most days to get to work, do you foresee any traffic impacts to Southeast Street during the dirt work?
Oh, I imagine there'll be a lot of impacts.
There's gonna be a lot.
It's a difficult, it's a difficult section of town during, especially in the morning, because, there's a number of people commute to UMass, and Southeast Street's one of those ways to get there. I think that's where we partner with the town and try to figure out other ways to approach it and what we can do to encourage, and promote better transportation through there. But, I think we're gonna, turn up as many ideas as we can. It is, it is a busy section of town, and it'll be tougher when we limit access to the school site. So it's going to complicate that, that intersection on the north end up there at Main Street, and because it's just so close. It's similarly complicated on the other end, although, we can tell the construction people not to drive their trucks during, this time frame, because, you're just going to sit in traffic and block stuff up. I mean, we'll work with them and coordinate that stuff, but I think as far as the school day, there's a number of things we're thinking about and looking at. Anything we can do to encourage people to not drive their kids and have their kids take the bus, because that's just fewer vehicles, just a fewer, number of vehicles. Are the things we can do with some of our school choice families, because they're compelled to bring their, to provide their own transportation? Do we partner with them in a different way to get their kids to school that lessens it and gets their kids safely to school? So there's all those kind of things we're trying to think about right now and strategize a little bit over the next few months, for sure,
Possibly
to alleviate that.
adjusting some PVTA routes that go through there, maybe.
Yeah, we'll definitely coordinate with them as well around that, because they do, the PVTA does run through there and turn up Main Street. They often come through Colonial Village. I've ridden that bus because I live on that end of town, so I've ridden that bus. So you go through Colonial Village and you go on Southeast Street through both those intersections, then you turn left and go up Main Street. It may be that, fortunately, I work closely with the PVTA, so I can talk to them about that, whether we should have them take an alternate route. So maybe they go and turn left and go up to Shumway, or go up to Whitney or something like that. It changes a couple of stops that are pretty actively used on Main Street, but that's things we need to connect and partner with them on. So we'll definitely do that as well.
Anyone else? All right, on to the next topic. Thanks again, Roger.
You're welcome.
All right, so budget timeline. Doug,
You just pull up the pictures here. So, I have to say, so I put a quick timeline in place for you guys to sort of understand the steps that are coming up, and this is partly, for those who've been on the committee or have, sort of looked, oops, too many clicks there, sorry. These are pretty standard for the Amherst school budget, but it's useful to kind of touch base on when our meetings are and when we'll be talking about which pieces of the process. So at the first meeting in the new year in January, we'll do a full initial budget presentation to you guys. It will be we'll put the full budget book together, which is a couple hundred pages in length. Right now we're beginning the process of putting it together and trying to make estimates on what we think will happen with regard to state aid, and we know what the town has given for guidance as far as what departments can increase their budgets, which is 3%. We'll factor that in. We're making our best estimates of our staffing and what their steps and COLAs are going to be. Most of the contracts are settled. There's only 2 that aren't. So we'll put all of that together for what's called level services, which is really taking kind of what our system is today and sort of rolling it forward a year and projecting costs as best we can. That'll be what's in on January 16th. I anticipate, given that the amount of ESSER funds that are being used this year and the amount that's remaining and the fact that it's running out, it'll likely be that and again, I haven't crunched the numbers yet, so we'll see how it plays out. But it's likely to be a tough year. And so when we get to the February meeting where we'll have the public hearing, which is a requirement, we'll have detailed additions, reductions, adjustments, that sort of thing. The governor's budget. Let me back up a step. The governor's budget comes out I want to say the 24th of January is the expectation. That'll help set some of the parameters of budget. That'll inform that February version of things. We'll get our, our formal indication on what our health insurance costs will be. Currently, we're estimating the health insurance costs are gonna go up 12%. You know, a couple percentage points are, you know, significant amounts of money. So we try to estimate conservatively now and hope that it comes down a little bit. You know, insurances generally are higher, particularly health insurance. The sort of, you know, impacts of inflation over the last couple of years are really hitting home. And then the return to, you know, more full care for people. You know, during the pandemic, a lot of people held off on certain health care, and they're sort of coming back into that. So our you know, and this is across the board, so it's driving costs up, and so a lot of people are experiencing their health insurance costs rising like this. So, but we'll have the firm number from our insurance folks last few days of January, the first couple days of February. So we're in February, we'll have a pretty significant, or a much clearer picture of where things sit, and we'll also be articulating where we think we are with regard to how we're going to close any gap that we have, and how big, you know, how we'll be much more precise with how much we need to close a gap, and what kinds of things we're going to do that. And so, you know, I've hinted to administrators already that, you know, we're going to have to start thinking now about the kinds of things we can do. It's unlikely we're going to have some significant change in enrollment, you know, or some other sort of windfall of circumstance that solves our problems. So we're going to have to really strategize deeply about what it is we're going to do to work within the funds that are available and try to deliver our schools at as high a level as we possibly can. When we get into March, and that meeting will actually do the formal adoption of the budget, and part of that is driven by the fact that you're compelled to provide a voted budget by April 1st to the town manager. And then he is compelled to have his complete budget, which includes the school budgets, to the town council by May 1st, so then in June that they can vote the budget for the whole town. Obviously, we have dates set for those meetings, but of course, if there are, you know, as needs arise, you know, school committee can call meetings when it needs to. So if something arises and we need to have more conversations about these things, we certainly can and will as needed. But this outlines, you know, sort of the major milestones of what's happening over the next few meetings, and that will be, you know, it will consume a pretty good chunk of each of those meetings to talk about that, and there'll be, I'm sure, rightly so, a lot of public comment, and during the February meeting where we have forum, you know, budget-specific commentary is part of the meeting, so those meetings will take a while, and you know, you get real feedback from the community about what they feel about those changes, and then you get to decide, you know, how you might meet the needs we have, whether it be the public comment or whatever. So that's a quick rundown of the calendar that's coming up for the fiscal 25. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about it.
Anyone? Doug, somewhere in there, there is a budget subcommittee for the Amherst School Committee. And it would, and this is something that can be brought up when it's reorganized, but certainly that budget subcommittee should be working along with you during this process.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And I think the other thing, and that I should also mention, is one of the things that the town of Amherst does is has a joint capital planning committee, which is where representatives, school committee, library trustees, the town get together and talk about capital projects. That will be transpiring along the same sort of timeline. Capital projects will be discussed in the January, February, kind of March timeframe. Also, there's a budget coordinating group, similar concept to the joint capital planning, but it's around the operating budget. You know, it's likely that you know, given the constraints of you know, resources and needs, that the budget coordinating group will meet a couple of times. They have similar conversations to the joint capital planning, where they talk about, you know, how the money's apportioned. So right now, the sort of guidance from the town is that 3% for each of the departments, which is 3% for the regional schools, 3% for the elementary schools, 3% for the fire, 3% for police, et cetera, et cetera. And so, budget coordinating group, will delve into questions around whether that's the way the town wants to do it, and are there other things they want to take into account. And so that budget coordinating group, it's likely that group will meet in January,
Definitely.
and then potentially multiple times through the year, depending on how the budgets are playing out.
All right, any questions or discussion? Seeing none, we can move on. The sixth grade move to Amherst Middle School. Doug?
So I wrote a short memo, mostly because it's not that we haven't looked at this a fair amount, and that's part of what the memo sort of entails, is a little bit of the work that's been done in the past. So the idea of the sixth grade moving to the middle school is one we know we have to do with the construction of the new building, and certainly there were, deep consideration last year about this time about a process for that. And that work actually started well before that, but about this time last year, there was sort of formal recommendations about moving the sixth grade in a plan to move the sixth grade to the middle school, essentially last August, really. When we got to January and February, we sort of put the brakes on that, for lack of a term. And so what this series of links does is it goes to each of the meetings in that November and early part of the November, December, January, February time frame, and just takes you to the page where there's associated documents. So there's the initial recommendations, which had to, which reference some work that was done over the summer and some background stuff. And so what it lays out is some of the things that we'll need to review and revisit and re-engage with as we think about the sixth grade moving. I think the thing that was in probably the very first document from November with recommendations, one of the pieces at the very top was, there isn't time to talk about the regional agreement and whether or not we want to change that. I think we have that option available to us now because I think, given that we've done this background work, and we'll revisit it, there's lots of questions. There's some things that aren't 100% resolved. Bathrooms being one of them that I think that we were still sort of in process on figuring out exactly how we wanted to do it, what was going to be the best set of choices around that for having sixth graders in the middle school. But one of the questions that we can come to, and we'll probably start working on right away, is whether or not we could modify the regional agreement and have sixth grade be a part of the regional agreement. Kind of late in the process, there were some indications that the former superintendent had with DESE around sort of selective or small-scale changes to regional agreements being something the DESE would consider and be more accepting of. In the past, they've not been. If you go back years, generally, if you opened up your regional agreement, it was a wide open process that you basically took it soup to nuts and went through the whole thing and really went through all the details with a fine-tooth comb. They're willing at this point to entertain smaller, more modest adjustments to regional agreements, and so that's an opportunity that I think we need to explore because I think there's a lot of potential there. That's not to say I have a particular feeling one way or the other. There's certain things I think are that seem like good opportunities for both the Amherst district and the regional district to have sixth grade be a part of that. I also see that there are some other problems and complications that may make that not the right choice. So I'm not, I don't want anybody to think I have an agenda here relative to this, but I do think we need to explore it as an option and look at what the pluses and minuses are, and we've got to partner with the other towns in the regional school district to make sure that they're comfortable with that process and the outcomes of that. So there's there's a lot of work to do here, and we can't start too soon. We absolutely have a firm deadline of, August of 2026, when those sixth graders need to be somewhere other than in the building that's going to get built down by Fort River. But, the action of the school committee in February of last year was to consider whether 2025, fall of 25 or fall of 26 is the right timeframe. And so that's, why, really, as we go through budget, we'll be looking at this as well. And these decisions have budget implications as well. But, the fall of 25 is not for fiscal 25, it's fiscal 26. So we've got, about a year to continue to work on this and take the work that's been done so far, which is a significant amount, revisit that, and then also explore some potential new topics and see if we can come to resolution on a best strategy that works for the most circumstances we can solve the problems for.
Any questions? Let's see, I see Katie and then Jennifer.
I'm just curious if there's, who besides you is making these types of decisions, and would this be something where a subcommittee of the school committee might be beneficial?
Maybe. I think the first step, I think one of the really big first steps that we'll need to look into is some of this around modifying a regional agreement. And that's one that, is just finding out the mechanics of it, the limitations of what the state will be comfortable or uncomfortable with. That's something that myself or staff can do. Once we have a sense of that, then I think, how we proceed at that point gets, there's a lot of political aspects as well as financial aspects as well as, operational aspects. So there's a whole host of things at that point. That may be the time to do that. But I think we sort of find out some baseline information and some fuller understanding from the state about what they allow, they don't allow. Any change to the regional agreement requires, formal action by the four towns. So they have to take that action. We'll probably try to offer options and work through cooperatively with them in the process if that is a direction we're thinking is a good direction to go, because we'll want to build buy-in and coordinate with each of the towns, because it will require in the three smaller towns votes of town meeting to formally change that agreement, and then likewise the town council will have to be on board. So there's a lot of political process involved in these kind of changes, even if they're very limited. So there's a fair amount of sort of political action that will be necessary to liaise with the communities, and definitely opportunities for you guys as political members of this committee to do that work. But I think so I think yes is ultimately the answer, I think, and not yet.
Jennifer?
So, just so I'm clear, Doug, so the idea of moving sixth graders to the middle school in fall of 25 is still on the table?
So the action of the school committee was to consider it. We have to move them in fall of 26.
Right.
Whether we want to do it earlier is, I think there are things it's worth reviewing to see if it may be necessary. In other words, there might be things that compel us in that direction. So I don't want to presume that there aren't. So I think we just have to evaluate that as a possibility. It may not be a viable one or a reasonable one or appropriate one, but I think we kind of have to keep that as an option in mind, because there may be, sort of financial pieces that drive us in that direction, or space needs that we have that drive us in that direction in our buildings, or logistics around, the functioning of Fort River while construction's going on. So those are things that I can think of off the top of my head. None of them may be sufficient to move us that quickly, but I think we just have to have it as an option available if it makes sense.
Okay. And I have a second question, which is, so it has to happen by fall of 26. and it's not going to be fall of 24. So whether it's 25 or 26 remains to be seen. And then another decision that needs to be made is, are the Amherst sixth graders going to attend elementary school in the middle school building? Or are Amherst sixth graders going to be enrolled in the regional middle school? In order for that second option to happen, the regional agreement, the agreement that we have with the other towns, has to be modified. So I feel like that decision should be made independent of what would it take to modify the agreement. We have to figure out if we even want to go down that road of modifying the agreement. I mean, maybe we should find out what it would take, but like, I feel like that decision of should sixth graders be enrolled in the middle school or not, like what are the things that are going to go into that decision?
So if you don't have, if the sixth graders are not part of the regional agreement, you effectively have to create a building within a building. So all of the requirements of a school building or a school come into play. So you have to have their own administration. You have to have your full set of reporting around all of that. So there are some pieces of overhead relative to a single school like that you have to sort of create from scratch and implement and report on, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If it becomes part of, that's just an example of, if it becomes a part of the region, then the students are intimately involved with the building, and so the ability for cross usage of staff is a lot easier in that regard. You don't have to carry another administrator. You may need, not to say it's exact, sort of, you don't add an administrator at all to the middle school, 7, 8. Yeah, it's, you add another grade. We'd have to see what the administration model that makes sense would be, but potentially you have a lot more opportunities for shared staff. Some of the way the curriculum works as you transition kids through can be potentially framed differently and perhaps better. And that's where we have to partner with our other communities because, you don't want to overly advantage, the Amherst kids because they're in the building a year earlier and they can get to X and Y and Z in a way that's overly advantageous. So, one of the ways that was discussed, if you go through some of the materials around world language and how to do that in a sort of fair and equitable way, and yet still provide, rich opportunities for kids, in a space that promotes that, right? So, those are all sort of balance, counterbalance kind of things that we have to weigh. I think from just a raw financial standpoint, I think it's much more straightforward to have them as part of the regional agreement. So that would be, and I'm sort of wearing my old hat and and thinking abstractly of any of the actual other things that are really important, like curriculum and materials and all that stuff. But just from a raw financial standpoint, I think it's much simpler and therefore probably somewhat cost effective to be in that arrangement. But there's questions of assessment method and what do the four towns feel is fair as far as what kind of assessment Amherst pays when they pick up another 170, 140 kids or so. So those are, it's not always as straight line as it might seem, but those are things. So I think, I think we see what the, I think the answer about some of what is required to sort of make the modification, I think, of course, I haven't asked the question yet, so I may talk to the state and they're like, you got to be kidding me, right? But I think that they'll probably be fairly straightforward what that looks like, how it plays out. Then we start getting into much deeper questions like you're asking, and I think that's where we really have to decide, okay, do we want to spend the time, pay the lawyers to write the language and all that sort of stuff, or is that maybe stickier than we want to get into and we'd rather do the other thing? I think, that's a decision point that'll come early.
Okay, so these are all things that you're going to be talking to people and researching on in the months to come, and then you'll come back to us with questions, decisions, a recommendation.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, so part of it, just to frame the sort of thought process here, and there's a number of things like this because there are other things that we've been thinking about in this way too. And so part of it's like, well, what other things do we need to attend to? And then how do we strategize the way to work through those things? So there's sort of, kind of two broad areas of thinking that we want to do as we begin the process so that we're timely with the work in the allowable time. And part of this is, courtesy to whoever's superintendent come July 1, that we just haven't sort of sat on our hands for 6 months, and there's a ton of stuff that could have been figured out. But we've got the other things to be thinking about that sort of parallel this are some things around we have to merge two buildings together, and what does that look like, and how does that happen? And it's sort of like closing a school, but not the same as closing a school. And the last time we did that, was 2009. We closed a very small school. It requires some thought, some nuance, and I think we did it fairly well, all things considered. It was very hard because it was, a lot of people loved Marks Meadow a ton, and it was a great school. And, it was critical how we thought about, bringing, both staff and students into new places and new spaces. So those are things that are, running parallel to this and are intimately tied to this too. So there's a few of those kind of things we're kind of trying to frame and begin work on over the coming months.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Gabrielle?
So I think this is perhaps a minor blip in the much more complicated discussions that this committee is going to have. But I want to put in a request perhaps, or just a reminder about communication with the students and with the families. So I have a daughter who's currently a sixth grader at Fort River, and when she was in fifth grade, they spent the first semester being told they were going to move to the middle school and being prepared for that move, actually being taken to the middle school and touring it. And, they had a lot of, they were set on this. And then they were told before the parents knew that they weren't. And so my daughter came home and said, I just found out we're not going to the middle school. And I had heard nothing of that. So, I would say that it ran less than ideally in terms of communication and thinking about the impact on the students. So since you guys have some time to really think out how the next move or the move will go in the future, I'd like to just request that how that gets discussed with students, when it gets discussed with students and parents, be really taken into account.
Katie?
Thank you, Irv. I would also, I guess, kind of along those lines, is really look at the opportunistic aspect of the move in terms of sixth graders moving to a new building. It's a fresh start. It's a tone-setting experience, if you will, to really capitalize on their potential leadership, their experience moving to a new location. The doors of the middle school level, 7th and 8th, whether they're apart from that or not, but just really looking at not only the logistical aspects of things, but from an educational perspective, how do you make the most of that, I guess, in-between stage to develop a sense of school climate, positive culture, et cetera.
Yeah, I'll thank you for that. And I think that, just as an example, when we closed Marks Meadow and we were merging both staff and students into really into all three buildings. So kids went, some kids that were lifelong Wildwood kids, they're like, why am I moving? But they, because of Marks Meadow, it sort of shifted. A bunch of people got moved. Not a ton, but, it depended on, but, you don't care how many. If you're the only one, it affects you personally. And that's true of the staff, too. So we tried to spend a fair amount of time thinking about those things and how do we build that sort of culture and identity for kids as well as the adults in those buildings. It's a pretty critical step in that. And I think, both with the sixth grade move and integrating those kids to a new space and place, and staff as well, it's a pretty significant change for everybody involved there. And I think where they leave from, are also significantly impacted by those changes as well. And of course, depending on when we do it, we may be, opening a new building, or we may be in the buildings we're in and then moving to a new building, and thinking about how do those cultures merge and change with that shift as well. So it's a point, well taken, and certainly appreciated by me, because, knowing a little bit of how we did it before, and wanting to be thoughtful about it again.
Anyone else? Did I see your hand go up, Katie? Nope.
No, Irv.
All right. So just a couple things. One is that this is not more for the upcoming school committee coming in, is that we only have 2 budget cycles to deal with this. This budget cycle and the following one coming up. Those need to be kept firmly in mind. Secondly, we as a school committee are going to need to sit down with Doug and develop a timeline in terms of when things will happen, so that not only the school committee is informed, but the community is informed. And not only just the community, but all of our partners, including the town council and the other 4 towns. So that timeline is going to be really important. Having said that, let's move on. All right, the next one. Superintendent goals. Doug?
So what I'll share with you is that these are the same as the regional school committee voted. At the regional school committee, when they voted these, there were a couple little additions that they wanted, and so I've added those to this. That's the one change from probably the last you've seen this. Pelham's adopted these as well, and we would have done this in November had we had that meeting, but we didn't, because it was, there wasn't a proper opportunity. So this is really, in some ways, no change from what you've seen before, and so I think we're hopefully able to just take action on these for the formality of it, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Do I see Katie and Roger also you? So Katie first.
So the last time we met, which was October 24th, I believe, although there's no minutes, we had voted to develop a subcommittee to review these goals. Irv and myself being part of that subcommittee, and we had a meeting scheduled, which was misscheduled and then shifted. But in the end, we have not met. So all that being said, and the fact that we did not meet as a Amherst School Committee in on November 21st, I think was our meeting that was canceled. I would say, given the fact that it's the Amherst School Committee that will evaluate you, Dr. Slaughter, in the spring, and 3 of us are not going to be there, I would actually vote to table this until a later date when the people who will actually be evaluating you can approve these. So I move to table this item.
So there is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
So the motion has been second. Is there any discussion? Do I see any hands? Gabriella?
I understand the reasoning behind the motion, but I think that several committees have seen this document. The material on here is fairly straightforward for what needs to happen in this particular year. I think it's gone through a lot of discussion, and I think there's no reason to continue to delay it. So I'm currently not in support of that motion.
Any other person want to discuss this? Anyone? Do I see a hand? Katie?
Okay.
My only concern is that the idea was to rework. The intention of the subcommittee was to gather, revisit these, to really distinguish, excuse me, what differentiates these goals, which were approved at the regional level, from the Amherst elementary level. I think there are some things that are applicable, but I think there also might be elements that could speak to solely the elementary school level. And this goes back to my original question when we were first introduced to these goals, which is how were these particular goals decided in terms of, is there a district improvement plan that, was the impetus, or, how do we prioritize these as a Amherst school committee with the elementary schools over, how do they differentiate between the region?
Any other discussion? No further discussion? Then we'll come to a vote. So, all those in favor? Raise your hand. I see one.
Point of order, Irv.
Point of order.
I think because we are not all present in person, we need to do a roll call vote.
If you say so, it's not necessary, but we can do one.
I believe the governor says so.
So, all right, so, Gabriella,
Nay.
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 All right, so, Jennifer,
No.
Katie,
Aye.
Roger,
No.
and Irv is aye. So the noes have it. So, since we're not going to table it, then I will entertain a motion to accept it.
I move that we accept the draft superintendent goals for school year 23-24 as written.
Second.
All right, so it's been moved in second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Gabriella,
Aye.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Katie,
Abstain.
Roger,
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
Irv is yes. That means it's 4 with 1 abstaining. So these are the goals for our superintendent. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, Doug. Future agenda planning. So, anyone have any items that they'd like to see on the next agenda? I see Jennifer, Katie, and that's, all right, Jennifer.
So, Irv, I'm looking at the agenda planning document, and you've got school committee reorganization, including ESBC appointment for the January 16th meeting. We'll also need to determine Amherst School Committee members on other subcommittees, as Doug mentioned, JCPC and BCG, as well as our representatives to the Collaborative, Amherst Media, CPAC, MPAC, and any other
Yeah,
roles
that's
or
all, that's all a
subcommittees.
part of reorganization. That's what reorganization is.
Great.
We reorganize. We
Yeah.
appoint all those people.
I'll
Okey
just,
dokey.
I'll just add that the ESBC I put on there because it's an atypical one, and it was mostly a note for myself. It wasn't to exclude anybody else or any other committees. It was just a
Gotcha.
note, it's like, that's one that doesn't come up as often, so that was more for me than anything else, so.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Katie?
So given the public comment that was showcased at the beginning of the meeting, I think it would be important to have an update about the status of paraeducators. And then the additional request, which I've been requesting since I was appointed, is an update about Caminantes. And I have to say, I'm still not clear after 3 months of how to get an agenda item passed, because I know Irv, you had asked it to be added,
I
and Sasha had
I will-
added it or whatnot.
I'll
But
share that it
Thanks.
might have happened tonight, but Katie Richardson was not available. She wasn't available this evening.
correct, is she actually working
Yeah.
in the district
Yes.
full-time?
No.
Okay,
She's
even
on-
kind of
she's on a-
update like that would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, but we have other
Would've
staff
thought
that are filling in, so, you know, but that's part of, that's not the entirety of, but that's one of the pieces of the puzzle.
And part of the reason why I ask is because I know I serve currently with MPAC, and they are inquiring. So I wanted to report out to them tomorrow, but
All right. Any other items? All right, seeing none, let's go to warrant report.
I have
Warrant,
several,
Jennifer?
yeah, I have several warrants that have come since October, so I'll just start reading them. I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $856.53 dated November 3rd, 2023. The next one is I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $1,246.81 dated October 31st, 2023. I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $541,668.27 dated October 31st, 2023. I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount, oh, that was the same. Is that the same one? $576,618.53 for the warrant dated October 30th, 2023. I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $537,860.43 dated December 13th, 2023. I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $189.58 dated November 15th, 2023. And I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $328,872.90 for the warrant dated December 11th, 2023. And while I have the microphone, I'd be happy to read the gifts.
The gifts. Thank you.
I move that we accept the following gifts from Martha Ulver, number 99667, 996687, 996646, to support Crocker Farm at principal discretion, $30. From Lucia Spiro, Pershing, number 402-966-5523, to support Crocker Farm at principal discretion, $400. Sanjay R. Wadi, number 840, to support Fort River Physical Education Program in the amount of $1,000, for a subtotal of $1,430. And from Garden Club of Amherst, number 1417, to support Crocker Farm Garden Project, $500. From Garden Club of Amherst, number 1419, to support Wildwood Garden Project of $500. And Garden Club of Amherst, number 1418, to support Fort River Garden Project of $500. League of Women Voters, number 1424, to support Fort River Library materials on women voting rights, responsibilities, preference, diversity, equity, inclusion, and/or climate change, $600. And Martha Ulver, number 996602 and 996624, to support Crocker Farm at principal discretion of $20, for another subtotal of $2,120. And from Amherst Education Foundation, number 1697, to support Fort River's Stream Table and Project-Based Development Initiative, $7,034. And Amherst Education Foundation, number 1697, to support Protect the Investment Amherst and Pelham Music Program, $14,156, for a subtotal of $21,190. I'm not going to add up all the subtotals, but there's the motion.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, we move to immediate vote. Gabrielle?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Katie?
yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Irv is yes, it's unanimous. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
So I will entertain a motion to
I'll move to adjourn.
adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Gabrielle?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Irv? Yes, and I really thank everyone, and I hope you have great holidays. Thank you very much.
You too, Irv.
You too, Irv.